computer and record, and share screen. Let's get going here. Okay, so like I mentioned before class started, animation really has 3 parts, including the animation keyword, which is a little bit confusing about all that. So let's get into this. So from the course website, under animation so we've taken care of transform. We've taken care of transition, okay, the difference between transform and transition. And now we're going to say keyframe animation. And keyframe animation, again, animation with CSS in general is done because this is performant. Right? We want this to run as best as possible across different websites. So much so that I want to show this little quick video. Yes, we're going to get out on time. Just watch this quick video for just a second, and so you can see what is happening here. So anytime I get a little bit of pushback, right, about, first, can you hear the sound?
Isn't to convince you that animating using margin is
good there? All right, thank you, Andy. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and play this, and what they're gonna show you here is, yes, you can use the box model properties, but every time we do that, it repaints the screen. It literally paints it white and paints it the 1 pixel, paints it white, paints it the next pixel. And that's not what we're looking for. We need a better way to move stuff across the screen with tweens.
performance tools can highlight the differences between animating using margin and animating using transform. The intention of this isn't to convince you that animating using margin is always a bad idea. It's to demonstrate how the tools can give you insight into the work the browser is doing to render your site. The website we'll use has 2 controls, a button to start-stop the animation, and a radio group to choose to animate using margin or animate using transform. With the button set to animate using margin, let's capture a performance profile. The green markers are telling us that the browser is spending a lot of time painting. Average frame rate is 46, well below the target of 60. Worse though is that the frame rate is very jagged, with lots of dips into the 20s. It's unlikely you'll see a smooth animation here, especially if you add in user interaction. If you scroll through the waterfall, you'll see a repeated pattern, in which we recalculate styles for every element, then form a layout, then a repaint. Now I'll switch the radio button to transform and capture another profile. This time the repaints have disappeared. The frame rate is higher and much less jagged. In the waterfall, you can see we're no longer spending any time in layout or repaint. You won't always see a performance benefit from using transform instead of margin. Performance is very sensitive to the particular system and its load. But the performance tools can help you understand the work the browser is doing to render your site, to help you diagnose problems when they occur.
So that is a pretty objective way of understanding this. And so when I'm talking about performance, that's really what I'm talking about, right? I don't need to talk to all the gamers out there. I'm not a gamer myself, but you all talk about frame rates and dips in frame rates, and you know, that's exactly what's happening with our websites here. All right, we got all of that, okay, out of the way. Let's go ahead and get into keyframe animation. All right, so we're into keyframe animation. Okay. Normally, if we had time, we would run through this DevTools Challenger, but I recommend that you do this in your own time. With Firefox, they actually walk you through how to some of the stuff you can do. And this is, if you take a look at this, all this is done with CSS animation. Okay. And they even walk you through how to animate specific parts of there. Okay. Actually, maybe at the end, we'll take a look at some of this. This is actually pretty good. We spent a little bit more time on this in class. Okay, let's get into the Master Professor pen and let's take a look at this. All right, the first thing I do is I'm going to show you how to do the just add water method. Okay, and then I'm borrowing this from Dan Eden, who just recently updated animate.css from the course website. Also, I've linked out to other things. Okay, so let's pretend that like forget this, Colin. I never want to make my own stuff ever. I'm like, cool, go for it. Right. There are a lot of tools out there like bounce.js where you can come into here and say, hey, select a preset. How about this thing called jelly? Notice that it's jelly, 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 jelly. And you can go ahead and go export CSS, and there you go. That's all that code, right? Whew, that is a lot of code, right? And the question to you is, what do you understand all that?
Hey, Colin.
Yeah.
We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, thanks for letting me know, y'all. I've been talking for how long? Okay. Well, I know one student is paying attention. Sorry, just kidding, y'all. All right, if that happens, please let me know. Thank you. All right, so we're coming here, taking a look at this. Right, it's bouncing, bouncing, bouncing. Okay. Right. So we got that. Right. So this thing is bouncing. Okay. And what we want to be able to do, okay, is when we play through this, right? There's an export CSS, and we want to be able to understand. Ooh, look at all that. Do you understand all of that? And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be able to say, this right here, I can copy and paste all of this, and it's going to save me some time, and that's great. Now we need to ask, well, what if I wanted to modify it? So we can go to another service like this called Animista. We can go try me, and let's just pick this thing called Flip. Like, woo, Flip. Right, and we can click on this button right here to get the code. Right? And it's the same thing. It's like, all right, so we copied out all of this thing called keyframes, and we pasted it into our project. Do we understand what it does? I'm doing two things here, right? Trying to drive my point home about understanding what you copy and paste. The other thing that I'm doing here is showing you third parties, right? Showing you different resources to make your animations. Some of you are going to want to create this from scratch. Some of you are going to want to use pre-made animations. There is no harm in doing both. There are pros and cons to each. So between bounce.js, between Animista, and the one that is used commonly is Dan Eden's animate.css. So if you can go to this website called animate.style, okay, you'll begin to see a lot of these animations everywhere. So what Dan Eden basically said is, look, there's this like shake, and there's this ta-da, and there's like this wobble, and there's some like common animations like this that are reused all again on websites, like this one called Bounce. And the one that we're going to try to remake today is called Pulse. Okay, and you see this all over the place. And what he did early on was he started making these, and then he started sharing them. And then, so you know, if I ever meet Dan Eden and or any of his friends and say, hey, you know, I buy you guys a cup of coffee because I have used your just add water animations before. So if we find stuff that is commonly used, like light speed out, that's pretty cool. Light speed out, right? Or hinge, you see hinge used quite a bit. And then if we hover over this, we can go on and copy to clipboard, okay, and begin to use this. So let's do just that. Go into your CSS section. Okay, you can go ahead and fork the professor pen right now. Go ahead and fork it. Again, I'm on the left or right of your, I'm on one tab, and you're on one tab. So go ahead and fork this, and into the CSS section. This is such a popular framework, this animate.css, that we can actually come right into here and add it. So we're going to search for animate.css right there. And I'm going to copy and paste that URL and share it with y'all. Okay, or you can just add it from CodePen. All right, so CodePen is making this process easy. We know by now in whatever this week that we're in, week 8, 9, that we need to add this to our HTML for this to actually work. All right, so whether you can go ahead and search for animate.css right there. Okay. All right, so once you get that added to your page, right, Dan Eden basically says, hey, all right, so you can come into here. Let's go ahead and use Hinge for just a second. How about let's use Jello because it's easier to type. All right, now I went to Jello and I copy that. I'm like, what does that actually do? All right, so what we can't do is we can't just say, all right, I copied this, Dan Eden. Now what? That's the whole point of this. Is like, well, now what? What do we do with this? And he's like, well, I expect you to have some understanding, right, of what this stuff is, and that's what we're going to talk about. The other thing here is, if you take a look at this or Animista or any of the other resources, like how to add this to your page, there's going to be a lot of different. This is Web3 stuff right here. Okay, Colin, stop talking and just show me how to add it in. Okay. The point I'm trying to make here is the method we're going to use is the method that we need to understand, right? So I want you to be able to go, that's my method. That's what I need for Web 1. The other ones, I don't want you to worry about. Okay, this is the method that we're working on today, and that's why I'm spending so much time on this point. Okay, all right, so we're going to use this @keyframes method. All the other methods, don't worry about because they're outside the scope of this class. All right, so once we have that added, let's go ahead and first let's get this thing working. So we're going to use this keyword called animation, and first we'll do it the long form way. We're going to do animation -name. Okay. And the name of our animation that we decided to borrow from here is Jello. We're going to add an animation name of Jello. And then we need an animation duration, okay? And you can see right there in 2020, right, on this version of this browser at this point in time, right now, these are the animation keywords, the properties, excuse me, that are available to us. Animation duration. And basically for an animation, you only need two things, right? You need the name of the animation and how long you're going to run it. And what we're doing here is we're running it on this element right here. So we've kind of left first frame, last frame for right now. And what we're doing right now is just using someone else's pre-made animation. And so let's go ahead and give this duration of 2 seconds. And it's going to run this Jello animation for 2 seconds. There it goes, Jello, 1, 2. Right, and you'll see this. So if we change this to 0.5 seconds, it's going to do the math and it's going to run very quickly. See how it runs quickly? So here's a quarter second, right? It's going to be jarring. It's going to just run time. So let's go ahead now and make it 5 seconds. And then what it's doing is it's doing what browsers do best. It's calculating the math between the last frame, the first frame, and the last frame, right? Just like we talked about in last lecture. And it's basically just dividing up all of the tweens in between, which is really, really awesome. But Colin, how do I get this thing to loop? Well, we're going to use animation iteration count. I believe it's iteration count. I could be wrong, but whatever. Let's figure it out. Iteration count. Okay. And all right. Now, what would make a lot of sense semantically? Ready for this? This is one of the things that is kind of upsetting about this stuff, and it's going to change. You think loop would be your value, right? And you think a repeat would be your value, correct? Can anybody guess what the actual value is? Logically, semantically, all the way back to week 1 and week 2, semantically, what would make a lot of sense if you wanted this animation to play over and over and over again? Anybody? It's infinite. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Kayla.
Repeat.
Repeat. Oh, that would make so much more sense, right? Loop, repeat. Anybody else? You're gonna be as angry as I am about this, or
Infinite?
Infinite. That's the actual answer, and it is not intrinsic. It is not intuitive at all, but it makes sense. So there's your infinite animation. And I'm sure there is a good technical explanation for this. I don't know what it is, but there you go. All right, so now you want to use a different animation. Now that we've added this library we've added this animation library into, right, we've extended CSS with animate.css. We can use any one of these as long as we spell them right. So let's go and try heartbeat with a capital B, right? I'm gonna go ahead and come into here and do heartbeat. Now it's gonna give us a heartbeat effect. All right, what other ones are on there? Let's try some of someone yell something out from animate.style there. Yell something out. What was that one that just came in there? Let's try, Hinge was the other one that we were taking a look at here. It looks like he's added some new ones. Ooh, Jack in the Box. What does Jack in the Box do? Let's try that. I'm gonna copy Jack in the Box. Okay, and paste that in there. All right, so now what, 15 minutes in a class? You don't have to listen to me for the rest of the class. You can just use this one or any of the other libraries that I showed you, right? The 3 that I've shown you today, and you can have animations on your page, right? So there's my dramatic pause of, do you know how this works? Well, yeah, I can get it working on my page. No. Getting it working is easy. I just followed the instructions. How does it work? So explanation versus understanding. And what I want us to get to right now is understanding. The other nice thing about this is about an animation is what we can't do with transitions. Okay, what we can't do with transitions is this. Let's go ahead and I'm going to simply make an H1 here, and this is going to be a header. And what is nice about this is there's that H1, it just says a header, is we can reuse this animation. So we can come into here and just copy out all that. We'll use the short form in just a second here. And now a header, right, is also being animated. And what we can say to a header is, hey, a header, run in half a second, 0.5. Okay. And so now a header is running at a different speed with the exact same animation. So you could really take one animation and customize all of the options and take one animation and make it look different, right? And use it on multiple places. So give a thumbs up to CSS animation, right? Why people aren't using it in 2020 is beyond me. So it's because it's there for us. All right, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and take a look at the short form. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the H1. Okay. Again, right, you can have it on multiple elements. Going to get rid of the H1 and let's go ahead and use the short form. So whatever one you decide to use, okay? So these are all the properties right there, okay? And examples of each of the properties. What we're looking for now is the shorthand, and that's right here, okay? There is no order for the shorthand. The only two fields required for the shorthand are the duration and the name, okay? And so first off, let's take care of that. All right, so there's a long form, which you can fork and keep, but we're going to use the short form. Okay, so animation, and what it is our name. In this case, it's Jack in the Box. And how long do we want it to run for? 1 second, and that should do it. Here, I'll keep that in there just for reference. All right, so that's going to run in 1 second. I mean, if we wanted to run it infinitely, we can just type in, if we wanted to loop, see, I already get them confused. All right, so there's infinite, right? Kayla, did you know, or was that a really, really good guess?
It wasn't me who said it. Who said it?
Okay. Oh, thank you. Andy, did you know, or is that a really, really good guess?
Good guess.
Good guess. Wow, you got it. I can say this, in all the years that I've taught this, you're the only person that has guessed that correctly. So I'm kind of in shock that that someone figured it out. So way to go. All right, ease in and out is the other one, as we know from last class, right? There's ease.in.out. Ease in and out is start slow, end slow, right? And ease out is slow, end slow, right? And these nuances are minimal, but they're there. Okay, let's go Jack in the Box. And what about hinge? Hinge was the other one that we're messing with. That's a cute effect. All right, good. All right, so in the remaining time, let's go ahead and make a custom animation. And the one that we're going to mimic is Pulse. Okay. All right, so we can do this ourselves, or we can use Dan Eden's animate.css, but both will work. All right, again, if I remove this library, okay, this doesn't work. So now what we want to do is actually make this. So I've gone ahead and removed this library from the project. Let's go remake this thing. All right. So let me comment this out and let's get started. All right. So if you've taken a computer science class of any kind, basically you're making a function and calling it, right? And if you haven't taken a computer science class, it's no different than in UX1, where you make a component, right? And you call it. And if you've taken motion design, right, you're making a symbol and calling it, right? You're basically making this Lego piece that you're reusing over and over again. And to do that, we're going to use the you're going to use at keyframes. Okay, come on, CodePen. It used to be just a KF tab. Let's see if it's still there. Did they take it away? No. Oh, they got rid of it. All right, I'll have to type it all out now. Let's type out at keyframes, plural, and the curly braces. And what we need to know here, I'm gonna collapse all of this because we don't need it right now. What we need to know here is this is like our at media queries, right? Remember our media queries? Same thing. Okay, this is a nested set of CSS rules. So we're gonna put those rules inside of here. So before I do any of this, right, in last class, I really stressed this idea of first frame, last frame, first frame, last frame. So temporarily, what you wanna do is just animate this thing, right? So a good place to start is draw your frames of animation first before we put them into here. So we can go div : let's use active today, right? Active is press and hold. And I just want to make sure that this is working. So I'll do a background of red, right? And when is the div, right? Or this box gonna go to red? Okay, so this would be our box at first frame. Okay. And I'm gonna spell frame all weird, but this is the last frame. Right, or page or book of animation, however you want to go hover over this, then we click and hold. Great. Now we know that this is working. Okay. And what we want to do, okay, on our first frame is make our div a little bit smaller. So we're going to come here, we're going to transform this. Transform this. Okay, so transform, right? And the property that we use, or the method we use to make something smaller or bigger without actually changing its dimensions. Okay, because we want to keep those dimensions. Those are our initial dimensions, and we're just going to modify the initial dimensions. So we're going to use scale, okay, and we're going to change the, so it's going to start out small. Let's go ahead and say 0.75, so 75% of its size. So there it goes. And then when we hover over it to make it pulse, we want to make it a little bit bigger. So how about 125%? I'm just throwing out numbers here. Let's try 1.5. Right, so click and hold, right? Oh, that pulse is maybe too big. How about 1.25? All right. All right, so that's essentially the pulse. And we're going to do a real dramatic pulse so we can see this. Okay, all right, so there's the first frame, last frame, first frame, last frame, right? First frame, last frame. Again, first frame, last frame. Do this. Okay, otherwise, whatever you paste in here, you're going to be trying to debug stuff as it's building, and that's not what we want, or as it's animating, excuse me. I'm stuck on Web3, we building different concept. All right, so once we have that, we can transition, right? We can test this out, okay? What property are we transitioning, y'all, from previous classes? Again, what's confusing here is transition and transform. Okay, transform is just changing the shape of it, essentially, right? So from last class, what are we transitioning? We're transitioning, what's that?
Is it the background?
We want to make it bigger and smaller. So,
Scale.
oh, close, right? Because this is, yeah, right? Because we want to where again, right? The transition property wants the property, right? And it's just like asking what is the verb or the adverb, right? In this case, you know, scale is the value, and property is the declarator, this is the property. And so what we're trying to do is take the property, because that's the value. If this was asking for the value, we would put in scale, but it's not. It's asking for the property in this case, right? And again, this line confuses us when you first introduce this. This line is confusing. I'm going to transition the transform. Yes. Let that sink in. Yes. Okay. It's just the way it is. Don't fight the browser. Okay. By Web 2, you understand that if you fight the browser, you're going to lose every time. Just understand the rules and just work within them. Okay. All right. So now when we click and hold, there you go. But then how do we get it to draw back? As we saw in last class, some of this is just a rehash of last class too, that if you put the transition on the first frame, because it's chasing its tail, it's going to redraw itself back, okay? Because from the first frame, it's going to draw to where the transition is. But now that we've moved the transition back to the first frame, it's going to essentially loop back around. So that's our pulse that we want, okay? And now what I'm doing here with this is these are all temporary. Okay, so my advice to you is if you're going to make custom animations, be able to do this first, then go in and tweak it. Okay, all right. Now that we got that, let's go in and build our keyframe of animation. All right, so to do this, we're going to start with two from and to, let's just start with 0. Basically, the point I'm trying to make here is keyframe. What we don't want to have to do, I'm going to get these backwards, so I'm going to look it up. See how I've already gotten it backwards? Yeah, let's try it. From this to this. Let's start from here. Yeah, we're going to use from, and we're going to use 2 curly braces, and you're going to nest these. And so all we're doing is we're going to copy out, okay, this transform. So I've missed the first part. Ignore this for just a second. Ignore all that. I'm going to cut it out just so you know. We need to name this thing, okay? And so you need to give this set of keyframes a name, and I forgot to give it a name. Let's call it our pulse or my pulse or web pulse. There we go, right? Capital P and web pulse. Anybody else got a cool name for this? I'll go to my kids. They're full of good names. It's too late in the quarter calling. All right, fine. We're just gonna call it web post. Good. All right. So from, it's basically our first frame, right? So we're on the first frame, I want the scale to be that. Okay. Now on the last frame, I want the scale to be this. Okay. So from and to. Okay. And so how do we know this thing works? Well, what we need to do now is comment out this stuff. Okay. And then what we're going to do is actually, here, I'm going to actually comment out that entire div active, right? And we're actually going to apply this keyframe animation of web pulse. Okay. And so we're right back to our beginning. And I'm leaving all these comments in here just so you can see this progression. Okay. All right. Now, if this is confusing, you can see why people use third-party generators, but you lose control with those generators. You don't have as much customization. So we're going to use the animation keyword. We're going to use the shorthand, and the name of this is web pulse. We're going to make it pulse in 1 second, and we want it to pulse infinite. And looks like my dyslexia did infinite there. Okay, finite, INT. Got them reversed. There we go. All right, there you go. There's our animation doing its thing, pulsing away. But notice that it's jumping back. Colin, I wanted to be smooth. I also wanted to do other things. Excellent. Let's go do that. All right. So now that I've shown you from and to, right, I struggled with how to get these things to go backwards and back and forth. What makes more sense is not a lot of people use from and to. Just use 0% and 100%. And what this allows you to do is draw in those individual frames of animation to make it more smooth. All right, gamers, you know, the more frames you have, right, the smoother the animation. Just like in your flip book, okay, the more pages in a flip book, the smoother the animation will look. And so why it's jumping back is really at the halfway point, it should be this. But then at the last point, right, it should be back to this size. It shouldn't have to jump back. So can anybody guess what this number should be? Right? Because these are the percentages of our frames of animation. So we're starting at 0, going to 100, right? What's at dead center?
50%.
50, that's it. Now what we've done is we've customized our animation. There's our pulse, right? Slow clap. And if you want it to be even more smooth, put even more frames of animation in there. If you wanted the background color to change, come in here, make the background, start it at a cornflower blue, right? And then have it end at background. It's going to go back to cornflower blue. So I guess we'd have to make this thing what red in between. Okay, and my timer is going off. So that means I have to let you go. So I'd want, right? there's our pulse. What if other things, right? As we saw from last class in the animatable, something animatable, layer Baru, there it is, right? Layer Baru's animatable. As we saw, we can animate anything that has what? A blank, what kind of value? What is the only one? Go ahead, Andy.
Numeric.
Yeah, if it doesn't have a numeric value, it can't be animated. Right, and so we saw this, and what else can we do? Oh, look, let's go ahead and steal this border radius ID. Right, so now what we can do is maybe at the halfway point, the border radius changes. Right, border dash radius, and this is where you get to have fun, and this is where probably a good place for me to stop. Right, so we're going to make it a circle, the halfway point, and there you go. Now that we have this, we can apply this to anything we like, including our H1. What is that going to do to our H1? So test. What is going to happen with the H1 on the border radius? Let's find out. It's got to have a background color. Oh, what color starts with G? Gainsborough? Is that a color? Nope. Gainsborough is. Oh, Gainsborough is a color. There you go, y'all. Let's give this some padding there so we can see it. All right. Let's go apply this animation, and we're going to do our animation of web, capital P pulse. We're going to have it run at 3 seconds. And we're going to have it when we run 3 times. Okay, again, 3 seconds. So there you go. We've reapplied this animation. So on the div, it works pretty good. On the H1, don't do it, but it was a fun experiment. All right. That is our week of animation. So you can see here between these 3 concepts, how they all work together. All right, we're using our transform, right? And the animation is taking care of the transitions. So if you only want to have 2 frames of animation, you use transition. If you want to have multiple frames of animation, right, you use keyframe animation. If you want to have reusable animation, right, animation that you can reuse over and over again, you use keyframe animation. If you want to have animation where you have control over the tweens and having it repeat on its own, use keyframe animation. Good. All right. Enjoy the long weekend. Have a good day.